So for a child, eczema isn't just a skin condition. It's a daily onslaught of pain, irritation, but also exclusion, also shame. Something they have no control over, no power over it. They cannot escape it. They lose in sleep. They're having to try and function with that loss of sleep. They're getting bullied at school, shamed for what they look like. Sometimes if they've got allergies as well, they are neglected. They are left out when there's things like children's play parties. They don't get invited. That happened with my children. People don't want to have to cope with or worry about the allergies, so they just don't get invited. So they know all their friends are coming and they're being excluded. They have to endure multiple creams, experiments with does this work, does that work, and some of them really burn their skin when they try them. Not everything is soothing. They repeatedly having skin prick tests and hospital invasive things, blood test draws. They can feel embarrassed and ashamed about how they look. All of these are things they're battling with day in, day out, and there's no escape. So these things build up in a child's nervous system, and then their brain gets wired to stay in danger mode. I don't know when the next thing's going to happen. I don't know when the next flare is going to happen. I don't know when I might have an allergic reaction. All of these things can create complex trauma symptoms in that child. You have a child who has eczema and they also have meltdowns, they struggle to make eye contact, they can be socially withdrawn, labelled as sensitive, and so you're wondering now whether your child has symptoms of ADHD or autism. And indeed, children with eczema do have a higher rate of neurodivergence than children without eczema. So it's very easy to jump to conclusions and label them and get them medicated. But I want to talk to you today about the possibility of complex trauma that is linked to children who have had eczema, especially when they've been battling with severe eczema. So these behaviours, there's a very big crossover between trauma behaviours and neurodivergence behaviours. Some of them are very, very similar. So it's not as easy as it looks trying to diagnose a child with chronic eczema with neurodivergence. So if you have a child who's got chronic eczema, who is also displaying these symptoms, it's very important that you are aware of the symptom overlap between these before we jump into conclusions. So I'm going to put a chart on the screen and then I'll just read through what we have. So look at the similarities here. We've got distractibility and inattention. This is very common in ADHD. And it also means that the brain is on high alert from trauma. The brain is on high alert due to constant distractions from itching, discomfort, and anxiety. Number 2, avoiding eye contact. This is often seen as a red flag for autism, but it's also a symptom of inner shame, fear of judgment, and trauma-related withdrawal. Number 3, sensory sensitivities. Often a trigger for autism and SPD diagnosis. But this can also be from inflamed skin, nervous system hypersensitivity, undiagnosed reactions to fabrics and detergents. So they're putting on clothes, they could be reacting to chemicals in the fabrics themselves, the detergents, the washing soaps, the freshener things that you put in the laundry. So all of them can cause these sensory sensitivities. Number 4, meltdown and tantrums. This is often said, okay, ADHD, autism, common symptom. But again, it's a sign of nervous system dysregulation and overwhelm. That can come from poor sleep, from constant itching, from emotional overwhelm, from flares and allergies, and also fears of medical tests and invasive medical procedures as well. Number 5, social withdrawal. We would normally say that's autism or social anxiety, but it also comes from fear of bullying. It comes from shame about your appearance, the trauma-based detachment, and learning response that physical affection is uncomfortable. If a child has a lot of eczema all over their body, then being held, which is normally a natural affection, is very, very uncomfortable for a child, because anything that makes them hot, makes them feel closed in and cramped, like car seats for instance as well, that will cause that child's skin to flare and become very uncomfortable. So their brain can become hardwired to learn physical affection is uncomfortable. And so then they can have this social withdrawal, and they don't like hugs and they don't like physical affection. They don't like people being around them too much or too close to them, because their brain has learned if people are too close, if people are too huggy, then I'm going to get an eczema flare. They're not consciously believing that, but it's subconscious wiring. Number 6, repetitive behaviors, autism, OCD. but that is also something that children do when they're creating rituals and routines to try to get some kind of semblance of control in an uncontrollable situation. It's a coping mechanism for anxiety and to help them feel like they have some kind of autonomy. Number 7, speech delays and shutdowns, which can often be seen as autism, but it also comes from overwhelm, emotional freeze, lack of psychological safety, and especially if they're shouted at by frustrated parents from scratching, and their parents have got their own lack of sleep that they're trying to deal with. And that's not to condemn the parents. I've been there, I know what it's like. Number 8, hyperactivity. They're a common symptom of ADHD. But if your nervous system is in fight or flight, particularly if it's in fight and you have high levels of cortisol, you're going to be fidgeting the whole time because the cortisol wants you to either run or fight. Number 9, night waking and sleep disturbances, which is often seen as ADHD and anxiety, but this is intense nighttime itching and cortisol dysregulation. That is also going to lead to disrupted sleep. And number 10, difficulties with transitions, changes of plans. We are told that that's autism or OCD, but it's also a desire for predictability in a world that feels unsafe and unpredictably painful. They don't know when they're going to get an allergic reaction. They don't know when they're going to get an eczema flare. They don't know when they're going to the hospital to get the next skin prick test or the next blood draws. So this difficulty is also a sign that they need that sense of safety in their life, that sense of predictability. So going forward, if your child has eczema and is displaying these symptoms which could be put down as neurodivergence, before jumping to a diagnostic labeling and medication, it's important to ask yourself the following questions. Is your child's nervous system dysregulated from pain or fear? Could that be a possibility? Are they getting enough sleep at night to be able to focus? If not, you might want to help them with something like melatonin, which will help them to sleep, and things like that. Maybe for a time, if their skin is really inflamed, an antihistamine at night can help with the itching. Not something you want to leave them on long term because it can have, again, impacts in the brain. But one of my children was on antihistamines at night to alleviate that, just for a few months, to help their skin to heal, give them a respite so that they could break that itch scratch cycle. Are their symptoms possible trauma responses rather than chemical imbalances? And even if they do have a measurable chemical imbalance, could that be corrected by dealing with the source of the trauma? Because we're holistic beings, we're all in one. So our emotions affect our thoughts affect our emotions, they both affect our physiology. So sometimes you can have a chemical imbalance, but why have you got the chemical imbalance? We need to ask questions, not just say, okay, chemical imbalance, let's just treat it. Why did you get the chemical imbalance? That could be from the trauma, from the feeling of being trapped. Chronic stress actually changes the way our nervous system works. And when these behavioral adaptations continue long term, then they become ingrained, like patterns. Our brain makes proteins every time we have a thought, every time we reason something, our brain makes proteins and lays those down. But if we keep having those same thoughts, we entrench those patterns and they become like a well-trodden path in the wilderness. That's the easiest route to go down. So our thoughts will run down that path. But then these thoughts and these ingrained behaviors can actually be complex PTSD symptoms and responses. So when someone experiences chronic stress, then their body goes into fight or flight. So we're either going to get loud and try to fight our way out of it, or we're going to try and run away. But if we're in a situation where we can't fight and we can't run, then our body can go into a freeze response or a fawn response, where we will just start to shut things down because we don't know how to cope. There's nothing we can do to deal with it. Researchers found that children who living with long-term chronic eczema, when they tested them, their stress levels, their cortisol levels were way, way higher than what they should be. They're living with high levels of stress day in, day out, like I said, compared to people who don't have eczema. And this has many detrimental effects. Stress hormones impact your immune system. And that's one of the reasons why children who have chronic eczema actually have double the risk, researched and proven, double the risk of developing autoimmune diseases of every single type. They have double the risk. And one of the reasons is this, because of their chronic stress, it's influencing their immune system. Now, could it be neurodivergence? I'm not saying that children with eczema don't have neurodivergence. That's not what I'm saying. It could be. And I'm not saying they don't ever have it. But what I am saying is there is such a similarity in the symptoms that it's something that needs to be considered before we jump to medication. Sometimes the children need to have therapy, they need to have a safe space to talk, they need to be able to express their frustrations, their feelings of helplessness, and they actually need therapy to cope with the emotions that are attached to the eczema and what it means to them. Because some children can also develop beliefs like, I've got it because I'm not as good as other children, or God's punishing me for something, or God doesn't like me. And these things really do need to be addressed in a child. Children make narratives to make sense of things. When they are trying to cope with something, they will come up with a narrative to try to make sense of it. And we need to make sure they're not coming up with narratives that are going to detrimentally affect them as they go forward in life. Some children with, going back to the, can they be neurodivergent? Some children with chronic eczema do have ADHD or autism. And there's actually shared common threads between a lot of them. Things like inflammation, rampant inflammation in both bodies. Both of them have gut issues. Both of them can have nutritional deficiencies. And both of them can have heavy metal toxicity, particularly from aluminum, which crosses the gut barrier, and it also crosses the blood-brain barrier. See, one thing that really shocked me was the amount of common links there are between aluminum toxicity in eczema and in autism and ADHD. They both are implicated when you have toxic overload in infanthood. So when you have aluminum toxicity, it can cause premature cell death. It interferes with the collapsing of the skin barrier, which is then weakening the skin and leading it to be very dry, and also allowing the water evaporation to go out, and also allowing ingress of bacteria and pathogens coming into the skin, which then triggers eczema and can be very highly linked to the development of eczema. And also it can cross the blood-brain barrier and deposit in the brain, which has been linked to ADHD and autism. So there's a lot going on that overlaps. So the problem is not so much us saying, is it one or the other? It's when we focus so much on labels that we forget that there is an individual there who is going through a lot, and we need to look at that individual holistically and see whether they are living with inescapable pain, whether they feel trapped, whether they have this torment that they are creating narratives to that is harming them and leading to sensory overwhelm. So obviously both of these conditions are multifaceted. I'm not saying that there's all or nothing. I'm not saying it's one or the other. I'm not saying there's one cause for both of them. My focus today is not trying to explain it away. It's saying that we need to look at children holistically, rather than just drug them up and medicate them for something that could be a trauma symptom, something that could be trauma-related behavior. The commonality means that we need to be asking questions. We need to be asking, is this aluminum toxicity contributing to both eczema and neurodivergent symptoms? Because if it is, then the focus needs to be on detoxing, not on medicating. And also, is it really neurodivergence, or is it trauma-related behavior or nutritional deficiencies as well, which we need to work on building up? So if this video has helped you, I'm inviting you to take a look at my course, take a look at my book on Amazon. They're both called Eczema Decoded, and it does a deep dive into all the issues that are going on inside this spider web called eczema. There's actually 8 different medical areas involved in driving eczema from the inside out, and that's what I mapped for you in Eczema Decoded, and I show you how to disable all of these strands naturally without pharma meds. So I invite you to check that out on the links below and figure out how to free your child, or yourself if you're suffering it from yourself, from eczema, so that you can get free from these. Please share this in your Facebook groups and other areas where you interact with people who are also suffering and struggling with eczema, because I have real answers in there that can really help people. Over 120 different peer-reviewed science documents that made up the core of this program, and this is what I help to free my own children from eczema. So God bless you. I will see you in the next video, and if you have any questions, don't forget to post them down below. If you have any suggestions, post them down below. Let's make this a community where we can support one another.